welcome. Thanks for attending. I'm Eric Graben, a YLS Council member and Business Development Officer at Safe Credit Union. Welcome to the second session of our three-part series for young professionals. Please know that we are recording tonight and we'll be sending you all a recap of the video from tonight's session in a few weeks. So enjoy and don't feel pressured to take notes. Thank you for your support for our young professional community. First, we'd like to thank our generous support of individual donors for this event and our presenting sponsor, Deloitte, and our community sponsors, SMUD, Safe Credit Union, and the Lescroat Sawyer family. Through the confusion, stress, and worry, the pandemic naturally causes young leaders, activists, and volunteers across the country are generating ideas, energy, and empathy. It's been proven time and time again that there is no better resource in times of trouble than young people. We need the kind of initiative and resourcefulness that can motivate a nation when it needs it the most. Next, I'd like to introduce and welcome Kula Koenig, Director of Community Impact at United Way.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kula Koenig, and I am the Director of Impact at the United Way California Capital Region. I'm happy to be here with you all. So I was brought on to spearhead, manage the Square One project that was started in 2016. And I like to always, when I talk about the Square One project, I like to tell people that it is a philosophy. It is not a program. It took me a long time to have to really drill that into people. And the difference is that when you have a program, that means it's set with certain things that you have to do, certain activities, right? And that's not what it's about. Square One philosophy is one that we can end poverty through education and community partnership and co-powering and partnering with community. And so that could come in different ways. You can have, different initiatives, different programs that will fall under that philosophy. Now we do have kind of 4 pillars around Square One, and that's to keep kids in school, right? To keep them on track while they're in school. And that's, sometimes some of our tutoring programs that we do, but it could also be different things, right? To have high expectations for them. And then this last pillar is to ensure strong community support. And it's really important because we know that a child doing well in school is not a vacuum, right? The community around that child also has to be one in which they're able to do well in school. And with the pandemic, now and folks being at home, that's even more important. And so I just always like to start to talk about it in that way so people know that it is this idea that we can end poverty through education and partnering with community. Now, some of the things that we've really wanted to also hone in on, some of our principles, are principles around equity, right? So what is a Square One philosophy? What is that approach? And equity is a word that is thrown around a lot. And I like to just be very clear that when we're talking about equity, it means that we're centering the voices, we're centering the services around those who are most impacted, those who are closest to the pain. And so when you design something and you don't have as many, you don't have infinite resources, you really think about who is most impacted and design services in that way. And so, what we've been doing is really thinking about intentional partnerships to that end with all the different sectors that the United Way encompasses. So we work with schools, obviously. We work with community-based organizations. Think about like your community centers, your libraries, your housing communities. Then we work with traditional nonprofits, and then we also work with funders. So a lot of our work has also been around thinking about how funders approach equity, and the way that they even require funding to be the requirements, the reporting, and all of those things, and the outcomes. Like, is this really an equity-focused outcome for a funder? And when we're working with schools and community-based organizations and nonprofits, how are we taking that equitable approach as we're talking about ending poverty through education? So I only have 5 minutes. My team knows I can go on and on and on about this, but I'm just really proud that we've been really challenging ourselves to think about people with the lived experiences, those who are closest to the pain in terms of thinking about ending poverty. And then also really pushing ourselves to think about there's a level of basic services, but then there's also a need for wealth building. And so we have to think through, it's easy, charity is easier than justice, right? And so we really try to focus on, okay, how do we respect people's agency and their ability to say, here's what I need X amount of money for, and I'm going to do what I need to do and have that autonomy, right? To work in a way that works for me versus being very command and control and paternalistic. And so I say that because we really, we're also kind of embarking on a systems approach. So we understand the United Way hasn't really been focused on policy. And one of the things that I've been really trying to do is work with our board to develop a policy perspective, because we also know that we can do all the programming we want, but if the system is messed up, then we can only change so much. So just a quick example, some of our advocacy was able to help us get money for the CARES Act to be able to actually help families, and that wasn't going to happen. And so anyway, so we're really taking a systems approach also to the programming and being very responsive to the needs of folks. So when the pandemic hit, I remember, we're all freaking out and it's like, what are we going to do? But someone like me who works for the United Way and has, good health care and was able to work from home and all of that stuff. But there were people who did not have that privilege that I have as working for the United Way. And so there were really people in need. People were waiting for the stimulus checks. It was taking forever for Congress to pass things. And then, we're like, well, let's get together and have our own COVID-19 relief fund. Let's reach out to our community, all of our stakeholders. Let's raise money and let's get this money out to people. No strings attached. You spend it however you want to spend it in a way that works for your family. Again, that's trusting and investing in people and trusting people's agency, not being paternalistic. So we raised almost $600,000. And I'm so proud because we were able to work with 11 nonprofit partners throughout our 5-county region who understood the needs of families, and they were already working with some of these families. And we took an equitable approach because we said, again, we only have $600,000. So we want this money to go to people whose level of crisis they were already in crisis, but that level of crisis had been amplified by the coronavirus pandemic. And again, that's an equitable approach right there, is targeted. And so we were able to help about almost 1,200 families. And you probably have seen some of the stories in the videos, but it really was touching, to hear back from folks that, lost their job, they're working in a restaurant, or someone was working at a care home. And she said, I didn't do anything wrong. I just lost my job and I need help. And so I'm just really glad for the United Way community that we were able to do that. And my time is probably up. I could talk for days, but, I just thank you all. Please continue to be involved. Katie is amazing. And yeah, I'm happy to have y'all as part of the United Way team. Mwah.
Thank you, Kula. It's so great to hear those stories. And among others, among various reasons that you explained, those are several of the reasons why I chose to join the United Way and the Young Leaders Society. And that's why I'm so proud to be a part of the United Way and our group here. For only $100 a year, we YLS members are empowered to support United Way's mission through regular volunteer projects, networking, and educational community engagement opportunities. As a member, we've raised $100,000 through the years for United Way's Square One project that addresses poverty through education and family outreach. Tonight's speaker is no stranger to how innovation and passionate outreach can make a difference. He's a medical student, social entrepreneur, researcher, Alzheimer's disease advocate, and podcaster. His work has been featured on the New York Times, Forbes, The Today Show, TED-Med, ABC, and several other news outlets. He is a strong voice leading America's youth through his role as the chairman and co-founder of the nation's largest youth-based Alzheimer's nonprofit, the Youth Movement Against Alzeihemers. He is leading our generation as a driving force of innovation in addressing public health. Please welcome Nihal Satyadev. Nihal, take it away.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate the warm introduction. I'm really grateful to be here. Everything that Kula talked about in terms of equity and really assisting people who need it the most are values that are very close to my heart, as well as our organization as well. So it's very exciting to see the trajectory that United Way is taking in a bold manner through the Square One project and supplementary policy efforts, which are, of course, extremely important to really change the system rather than work within a broken system. So really love that. Also want to thank Katie, Carrie, Kyla, Eric, rest of the YLS team for inviting me. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share my screen here. I don't have too many slides. I don't want it to be a very slide heavy presentation, but do just have a few to guide this discussion. So let's see here. No, that is not what I want to do. There we go. All right. So just briefly an outline for today's talk. I'd love for most of the time to be spent on Q&A if possible, but I do want to just share a broad framework, which I like to use for choosing how to engage myself in various projects, and especially in community-based efforts, as well as discussing how COVID affects this engagement a little bit, my personal experience using this flowchart, and then also going into Q&A. So community engagement and how do we do it? So this is the flowchart I like to use. You start first with introspection, go into community needs, actually do the engagement, evaluate where you're at, and then after a certain period of time, reassessing, and it kind of creates a continuous loop to help you know where you are with your community engagement and whether that aligns with your personal values. So let's go ahead and just start by discussing a little bit about introspection. So what do I mean by this? Obviously, a lot of people talk about, it's very important to know yourself, to know what drives you, but that is a very broad way of looking at things. It's a really difficult process to know yourself by just sitting down on the couch and suddenly having a moment of clarity, being like, oh, this is exactly what I want to invest all of my efforts in. One thing that I do think is really helpful and beneficial is that you all are already in a very positive-minded community. I think United Way's mission statement of improving lives by mobilizing the caring power of communities around the world to advance the common good. It's a very powerful and broad statement. So it really does, I think, empower people to engage in a variety of ways. So introspection specific to community engagements. So here we can look at it in 3 different ways. First, what are personal events that have happened during your life that have affected you deeply? Now, this can be deeply in an emotional way, in a financial way, but really things that have put you at the core of a problem that not only you faced, but other people have faced. So an example of that could be the loss of a loved one due to a disease. An example of that could be having, lost your home or having seen your parents lose their home during the financial crisis of 2008. And another thing could be right now, we're going through a very serious time with COVID, and obviously there's a number of ramifications for that. So thinking through that and aligning yourself with something that has already affected you deeply will allow you to translate that event 180 degrees and use all of that energy of which you've been using to really just power yourself and dig your family out of this hole, to leverage that same emotion, but combine that with the experiences you've had to empower others to rise out of similar situations. So that's one aspect. A second aspect is really taking an assessment of your strengths. So here I'm talking more so about soft skills, right? Are you by yourself, very much so a team player? Are you more of someone who's independent minded? Are you someone who likes to be given direction and you like to run with that? Knowing those sort of soft skills about yourself really allows you to understand where you want to plug into a team that might already be existing. Not every single way to make the world a better place involves running a nonprofit, involves running a socially minded business, involves becoming, a highly ranked political leader. There's so many ways to engage in the communities that don't involve doing any of that, but understanding your niche will really involve you to take a step back and think about what type of soft skills engage you the most. And then finally, the other half of the skills assessment and the strengths assessment would be to look at your more hard skills, right? So, do you already know how to code? Are you a financial genius? Do you work in a banking setting? Are you an accountant? Maybe these are the sort of skills that are either from your day job, you've learned through your education, or you've picked up on the side over the course of your lifetime. So now that you know personal events, you know your soft skill set, and you know your hard skill set, this gives you a best idea of perhaps how you can best involve yourself. Now, the final step before really diving into involving yourself is community needs. So you might have had a, deeply traumatic personal experience, and this is something that you want to make sure other people don't come across. But if your personal experience is so rare and so unique that it's not something that other community members are feeling as a need, then there isn't really much of a space to address that for the people who you're surrounding yourself with. Now, I don't live in Sacramento. I don't claim to know all of Sacramento's issues, but I have been to Sacramento many a times for working on bills in California. And I will say that some of the issues that I hear, at least at the Sacramento River, Delta River area, is that you guys have control of all the water in the region. And all of that water is not necessarily perfectly allocated. So, that's a huge issue. Income inequality is an issue in every single community in every single city in California. Homelessness is an issue that's on the rise, especially now due to COVID, due to displacement with the fires. So taking an assessment of the community needs will also guide you in choosing where to best engage. Now, the tricky part comes in what if community needs don't align with your personal experience? And that's something I'll dive into a little bit later when engaging. Now, once you have all of these four, I think this allows you to, in the best way, to know how to engage yourself in the community. Now you can go ahead and search for existing organizations that are working on the issue that you feel is best, or organizations that are maybe issue agnostic because you have a skill that can be utilized by any number of organizations, and you're looking for an organization that needs the utility of that skill. Now, one way you can find these organizations is, of course, using the internet, using United Way's community, using your networks that you have, and really seeing where is help needed the most. And I think that when you put yourself out there saying that, hey, like, I want to support an organization that is working on such and such disease, I want to support an organization that is working to address climate change, so on and so forth, I think people start knowing that that is something that you are looking for, and the connections start to happen. Now, with engaging, I would suggest not waiting for the perfect organization where your soft skills are met, your hard skills are met. This is something that you've been personally engaged with before, and it's a community need. That's not realistic to necessarily happen right off the bat. But I think especially at a time like this, and especially because you all are such community-oriented people, I think it's best to go ahead and just get involved right away. And then finally, take an evaluation after a short period of time. So with an evaluation here, I think there's two things that are important to really see if you're engaging in a way that is the most beneficial to you and the most beneficial to the purpose that you are looking to serve. So first is really with whatever organization or entity you're working with, is the work you're doing truly fulfilling the reason you pursued this? If the reason you pursued this is because of the personal experience you had, do you feel like the work you're doing is actually aligning with that need? I will say that if you don't feel that sense of alignment over 3 months, over 6 months, it's probably not something that is going to foster itself suddenly in the 8th month or the 9th month. So that's an important thing to be thinking about. Another important thing to be thinking about is perhaps the team that you're working with. So the team of people who you were working with in an organization, they might not be resonating with you. They might not have the same workflow as you. They might not have the same pace as you. And if those sort of things are in friction, then this might not be the best organization for you. Now, one of the interesting good and bad things in the nonprofit space, which we can discuss and dive into later, is that there's so many nonprofits. I know only the statistics from the county of Los Angeles, but at the moment, there's more than 38,000 registered nonprofits in the county of Los Angeles. And I don't think there are 38,000 social issues that need to be addressed. Now, there's good and bad about that, but the good thing for that, for the purposes of community engagement, is that if you don't like the team, you don't connect with that issue right away, there's so many other organizations that need human capital. And you being there, you already knowing your skill set and putting yourself forward for this sort of organization, that's going to already have a huge value, no matter what the size of the nonprofit is. One of the most important resources for any nonprofit is human capital, the amount of time, intellectual investment, and energy that people can provide is tremendously important for any sort of mission to be moved forward. Now, the last thing in this loop is reassessment. So the point here is just that if you've done this, you've evaluated yourself in 3 or 6 months, and you feel like, wow, I'm perfectly aligned with where I want to be, I'm engaging how I want to be, it's still important to reassess every couple years. And the reason I say this is because different personal events change every couple years. The world is changing at an incredibly fast pace, and things that may even be important community needs right here in 2019 might not be the community needs that you resonate with, or sorry, in 2020 might not be the community needs. I almost thought this was the pre-pandemic era. Might not be the community needs that you resonate with in 2022, 2030, whatever it may be. And with the world changing at an accelerated pace, I think it's very important that we stay nimble to that, and that we make sure that we are taking a look at that every while to make sure that the missions we're working on continue to maintain that importance in our lives. So now I'll just kind of dive into how did I go about my, I created this flow chart, for the purposes of breaking down my framework of how I look at community engagement. But this is not necessarily the exact framework which I used over the course of building, my nonprofit and my community engagement. It's only on retrospect reflection of the experiences that I had that I realized, oh, this is actually what I was doing. So, as you all know, I'm now, extremely engaged with the Alzheimer's community. Started an Alzheimer's nonprofit 5 years ago. I actually just got funded to start a 501c4 that'll be working on the policy side. I've been irking to dive more into the policy side of Alzheimer's and really address the systems. But it didn't really start like that. How it really started in my early, teenage years was, my grandmother getting diagnosed with this disease, seeing its impact on my grandfather, and seeing its impact on my parents. And in that time period, I was pretty much useless for several years. Yes, I would spend some summers in India. I would, help out, my grandpa where I could, but I really did not feel like I had much utility towards addressing that, nor did I have the tools, nor did I feel like I had the appropriate education to be assisting her in any way that was truly helpful. And so that kind of feeling of helplessness drove me to just start getting involved in research in neurodegenerative diseases. And I did that for a several number of years. I got involved in my first lab at the age of 15, was working different summers in research settings. And after a while, I reassessed. Right, I'd already introspected. I'd already realized that this was something that was personally important to me. I didn't really care about the community needs at that time because I was just thinking about my grandma and my family. But in reassessing, what I realized is that research is a very powerful tool, but also a tool that takes an incredibly long time. And for people who may not be so involved in the pharmaceutical space, from the time that a researcher finds out that a molecule could be beneficial as a drug to the time that the drug comes out in market, there's two things that happen. One of which is that you go from 10,000 possible drug solutions to one or two drug products. And that time period in which that happens is 20 years. So after working in research for a while, I realized, okay, I see the power in this. Obviously, research is the only way we're going to find a cure, but maybe this is not the way I feel like I'm truly accelerating my work in this area. Maybe I should supplement this with volunteering. So I got involved with Alzheimer's Association, and I was just doing some basic research for their policy team, like looking at congressional districts, seeing how many caregivers there are, seeing how many people who had dementia, creating some district maps. But in that process, one of the things that happened was I got invited to their major annual conference, and they had this youth leaders section. It was kind of similar to YLS, but not so organized. It was just mainly for that conference. And in that period, I realized that their equivalent of young involvement in Alzheimer's was mostly people who were between the ages of 35 and 40. I don't think I met anyone else in that conference. I mean, maybe there was one or two people, I didn't meet them, but I don't think I met anyone else in that conference who was even in their 20s. And I was at that time 19, or in their early 20s. And so I realized, wow, there is a huge gap in youth engagement in a disease that is the most expensive disease currently for a healthcare system, that is growing in numbers very quickly. We're looking at the doubling of our aging population being people who are 65 plus in about 12 years. And no one my age is doing anything about it. So I did a further community needs assessment and realized that that there was only 4 schools out of the top 150 schools in the US that even had an Alzheimer's or dementia related club on their campus. And that was really shocking to me. So therefore, I found a kind of sub niche within the disease where of my specific community of young people addressing this disease. I didn't have all the tools to build. I mean, I didn't know anything about nonprofits at the time that I first got involved and had this idea. But given that the community need was so high, given that my personal alignment with that was so deep, the hard skills and the soft skills, I felt those just would come over time. And so I just started getting more and more engaged. I started just calling up people in different schools saying, hey, let's start a chapter. Let's, just get the word out. Let people our age know that this is a huge healthcare crisis that is waiting to happen. And there were many learning lessons along the way. One of which, I have no problem sharing, is that we grew from 0 to 33 chapters in the first year, and then from 33 to 12 chapters in the second year. And so it was a big learning lesson of, the importance of building quality rather than quantity, and the importance of, building models of advocacy that are sustainable over a period of time. So, the process of engaging, I think there are things that you will learn that will help you better evaluate, and in the evaluation phase. And, in my position as having, started this, the changing of the team, all of that was, in my control, but anyone could also leave our team. For the first 4 years, we had 0 paid individuals. We all worked as volunteers. And we had pretty good retention of people on our team. Most people stayed for 1 to 2 years plus, which is, not bad for people who are in their very early college years, don't know what they want to do with their lives, and are kind of just volunteering for things on the side. And now we have people who've, been with us for 3 to 5 years. So I think the important thing there being is that not everyone stayed, because our mission didn't truly align with everyone's, introspection and their true alignment. So there's nothing wrong with leaving a team, leaving an organization. There's nothing you should feel bad about being like, oh, I've given up on this project if it's not aligned with your personal drive and your personal mission, because you're not giving up on community engagement. You're just simply transitioning from an organization that you feel good, decent about, to an organization where you get up every day motivated, driven to get their mission across, to do the work that is needed, to do awkward things, difficult things, whatever it may be. When you are doing those things where you didn't even realize that you had it in you to do, it's at that moment that you truly know that you're part of something bigger than you, and you truly value the mission that the team that you're a part of is embarking on. So that's kind of been my experience with this. Now, I kind of jumped ahead before truly diving into what COVID has changed about this entire process. And COVID, for, if any of you have been affected, my condolences. It's something that is very hard to see firsthand, being in an organization that works so closely with older adults. We were about to launch our main program, which is a caregiver respite program where we train college students to provide care and care services for older adults who have dementia, and partner them in their home so that their family caregivers have some time off. And the week we were going to launch that was actually the week of quarantine orders. So, it was difficult for us organization-wise. It was difficult to see, the number of seniors that are being directly affected, that are scared, and are getting health complications due to the anxiety and stress that this brings, and the family members that are going through all of this. But there are certain silver linings that we can pull out from this experience that I think are truly things that allow us to grow from this experience and engage in a social impact community in a way that we've never had before. The first thing is the fact that we can do things like this. This talk had to align with literally an hour and a half of my schedule. It did not involve me having to fly into Sacramento and setting aside a day, or having to incorporate travel time. So things that might not be specifically located near you, even if that means it's in a county over, 2 counties over, whatever it may be, you're now able to hyper engage with people with 0 travel time. And that's something to really take advantage of in regards to spending that time and recognizing that you are saving that travel time and reallocating that to potentially doing things that'll better set you up for community engagement. So one example of which is literally just cold cold emailing is something that I think people are really afraid of, and I think it's not at all worth being afraid of. If I get a cold email, I'm personally most excited by it because I already know this person had to go through some sort of interest of reaching out to a stranger and being vulnerable to make that ask. And when I've done it, I've never had anyone respond being like, why are you wasting my time? Don't ever talk to me again. I've never had that happen. I've had many, many non-responses. I've had many, many flaky responses, but I've had one or two positive responses out of a set of cold emails that made that entire set of cold emails completely worth it. And the more that we can engage with people over forms of emailing, phone call, whatever it may be, this is the time, I think, to take advantage of that. The second thing I think to take advantage of is the fact that there's now more focus on social issues. Yes, there are some, maybe non-specifically COVID-related movements that have started, that have sort of amplified during this time, whether it be, Black Lives Matter, or other criminal justice issues, racial justice issues, but other issues that are traditionally not at the forefront of people's thoughts, like older adults, healthcare, social isolation, social determinants of health. These are all things that have now shifted a little bit more to the forefront. And so if you were maybe working on an issue or felt compelled towards an issue that COVID has brought in light to, this is now a time to really run with it. And the second thing is, because so many people are hurting right now, it is all the more reason to make this process a lot more rapid. Go as quickly as you can from 1 to 2 to engagement, because engagement is really what's needed. If you are working on feeding your neighbor, if you are working on addressing an issue of a local homeless shelter, if you are working on, helping disinfect a nursing home, whatever it is you're doing, you cannot be wrong during this time because everything is needed. And the thing that the timing of this talk, somehow ended up being right during the time when we are about to kick off into the worst part of COVID. And, people might say, oh, that's kind of, that's fear mongering, but this is just based on the science of how, coronavirus has existed, not in this form, but in many other forms. And we know how coronavirus likes to act in colder temperatures, and it likes to be more aggressive in colder temperatures. So if there's a time for young people to step up and help in society, a society that is going to be within the grapples of a pandemic, there is no better time to actively engage and, then go ahead and reassess. So those are a couple of things where I feel like COVID has made a little bit of an impact. And for people who are socially minded, I would say to make sure that you don't get into the process of analysis paralysis, I think is what it's called, where you are like, oh, should I do this? Or should I get involved in that? Should I get involved in that? There's no wrong decision. Whatever you get involved in during this time is a step forward for that organization and for the involvement. And it's kind of one of those times in histories where we only get through it through the support of our neighbors and through people like us who are really focused on addressing social issues, stepping up and doing that more forthright. So I kind of went ahead and talked about this part already in terms of how my personal timeline around this is, but I really just want to doubly emphasize that being a community leader, leading with community engagement, does not mean you have to start a nonprofit. In fact, I encourage most people, please don't start a nonprofit. If your nonprofit is not specifically have a mission that is unique and that is a specific purpose that other nonprofits are not working on, you may be just wasting time of your, very well motivated interests of making a difference, because your same time and energy could be used to optimizing an existing nonprofit that's already having an existing infrastructure rather than building one from scratch. Now, there's obviously times where that's not a universal rule, but it is just something to think about with community engagement. And that's the beautiful thing I see in the social impact space, is that there are leaders at every level. Just because I have a title slapped to my name does not make me the best leader in every space, even in relation to my organization. There are very much so times, in fact, more times than the majority, in which I know there's some other people on my team who are better equipped to be leading this effort, to be leading this project, to be leading this meeting. And I rely on those leaders within our organization to take forward that leadership. So please do not associate title with leadership. I think that's the biggest mistake that traditional leadership and traditional nonprofit structure tries to ingrain into us. So with those sort of thoughts, don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'd love to transition to Q&A. Oh, there's so many things popping up. I did not read all of these chats. I'm sorry. Okay.
All right. Are you there, Nihal? Can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, welcome back. Great. Thank you so much for all that information. My mind is just going 100 miles an hour right now. All great information, the flow chart. It reminds me a lot of myself, obviously not starting a nonprofit or anything, because that sounds like a lot of work. Like you said, I wouldn't necessarily go out there and start my own nonprofit, but I did see some questions coming in. We can get to those here in just a moment, because I'm sure you're anxious to answer those questions. But to your point, finding something that you could be passionate about, that was one of the things that I was looking for, because I loved volunteering and I loved giving back. But it was really finding something that kind of fit your mission and your drive. And it was, for me, something that I was afraid of not showing up and not giving value to. I think if you are hungry and you're anxious and you're motivated, and it's something that encompasses all of that, you'll find a great match out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of harp on that point, because the issue of passion is something that I've grappled with, because I've tried to introspect on why is it that I feel so driven to work on this cause and so motivated. And I've been reading more and more lately about the science of passion. And it's really what the science tells us thus far about passion, and the psychology work that's been done, is that passion is usually not driven by a specific thing that you feel internally. It's driven by you being a part of something and recognizing that on your journey of being involved with said organization, said company, said project, that is going to allow you to both share your skill set with the larger community and also allow you to grow as a person. And so, I kind of already looked at the Q&A a little bit, and I want to touch on Allison's question here, which is
Sure.
that, tips on keeping volunteers engaged. And I think that aligns with personal passion as well, in that, one of the things I think is very important when I'm working with a team is that people are growing professionally, personally, whatever their personal growth missions may be, they're growing through this effort. And I'll give you just an example of that, which is that in an Alzheimer's organization, most people traditionally think, oh, you're attracting a bunch of pre-medical students, medical students, health-related people. But some of the people we see that are most engaged are people that are super interested in HR, in digital design. And the reason for that being is that we have a way for them to share that work and grow in their design skills by helping us with website, helping us with UI design on, a tech platform we might be working on. And so I think that as long as the volunteers you're working with feel like they're growing during that period of their life, that 3 to 5 year, 1 to 5 year, whatever time period that you want to keep them engaged with long term, I think you're going to continue to see them come back for more, because it builds a positive loop of investment and growth within their, within their space.
Great. Thank you. It looks like the other question was in regards to some of the cold calls or cold emails that you were making, and say you do have someone that responds to your cold email, and what are next steps that you would suggest following up with from there?
Yeah, so I would say always cold email with an end goal in mind. So, not just cold emailing for for the purposes of just general networking. I don't think you're going to get much responses with that. But for example, some of the cold emails I've had the most success with was personally one is seeking mentors. So, with the end goal in mind of, hey, I'm looking for someone who can help me guide how to do X, Y, and Z. And once they respond, the next thing is just go ahead and set up that meeting to start seeking that advice. On another angle, if it's specifically for the purposes of engaging with a community, hey, VP of, this such and such, hey, project director such and such, looked at your website and loved the fact that you're working on this, this, and this, would really be interested in involving myself in your project, was wondering if you'd had some time to share more about the project. Next thing, you're on the Zoom, talking to them if they respond, and really then diving into a number of questions that you might have. How do I get involved? What are the hours, right? And if you're volunteering, no one's gonna say no to a volunteer. If you go to an organization that says no to volunteers, their infrastructure is just not set up correctly. And so, you already have the edge in that regard. That's kind of how I would go about that.
Well, another question. Why should a young leader consider volunteering or serving in the community? Should they do it for career advancement? Should they do it for growth, to your point in the last point there? Or, I feel like everybody has a lot of other things going on. Why should they contribute?
Not everyone has to. If you don't feel called to do it, there's no one stopping you from not doing it. But the thing is, if by not doing it, I feel like you are missing out on a very powerful part of life potentially. And that's actually why I put that quote up really briefly on my Q&A slide, which is my favorite quote of all time, which is that we all have two lives. The second one begins when we realize we only have one. And so I think we're all on this journey, on this wild spinning rock, to somehow make meaning of this experience of 20 years, 40 years, 80 years, 100 years that we are given and allotted to be here on this floating rock. And so on that way, a big part of us finding out about what that meaning is and finding our personal purpose and our personal mission and what it is that is our calling is only by starting that loop and actually engaging and actually realizing, oh, this is not my calling. Oh, this is somewhat of my calling. Oh, I realized I like these skills. Oh, let me go involved in this. And, I feel truly blessed. Like, yes, I might be super busy. Yes, I might be stressed, but I feel truly blessed because somehow in my life, I was lucky enough that that calling for me came at the age of 20 when, or earlier, when I started on this journey of like building this and getting super involved with the Alzheimer's organization, and recognizing that this population of individuals who were dealing with something for no fault of theirs that is tremendously difficult is somehow giving me the spirit to live my own life. And I think that spirit is something that, yes, there's organizations that will help you develop professional skills even through volunteerism. There will be organizations that help you grow with your networking skills. But no matter what it is, you're a lot closer to finding that drive, that life drive, I think, if you're actually out there engaging.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me see. It looks like there was another question that popped up here. So thank you for sharing your experience and helpful tips. The question that I have is regarding accessibility and ableism when providing informational resources and support for the most vulnerable and marginalized communities, homelessness, mental health, disability. Do you have any tips for providing inclusive engagement and training with your volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one, my answer is pretty brief. I would say find the local, nearby, or even national disability organizations, and they will have pre-made training material. Oftentimes, this training material is things that they're willing to disseminate for free, and then just make it mandatory during your onboarding of volunteers that they learn this stuff. And we have the same thing for elder abuse, because that's directly related to our efforts. And that's a super important question, and I think pretty straightforward thing to do.
Awesome, thank you. I think there's maybe one more right now. Hold on, give me 1 second. What if you are not sure what your passion is, but want to get involved? I think you may have already asked this question, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really an iterative process. I think if you go in with the expectation of engaging only after you find your passion, you'll never engage, because you find your passion through trial and error. And you might be completely surprised by where you end up finding your passion. There's a lot of things I was passionate about in terms of social impact. I was really, involved in student government. I was really involved in, actually, it's really, the Square One project is kind of close to some of my earlier work, because I was very involved with an organization in India that looks to alleviate poverty through education. And so I think it's really a trial and error. And it's better to start that process than wait for yourself to find an epiphany.
Awesome, thank you. Maybe one last question here for you, Nihal. What are creative ways you've promoted engagement? I guess kind of continuing that conversation there.
Yeah, so with volunteer engagement, a couple of the creative ways. First thing is, even during an onboarding effort or an interview effort or whatever it is, the question I'm always asking is, what do you want to gain out of this personally? You as an individual human being that has inherently selfish desires, as we were all built to have through natural selection. What do you want to gain out of this time with our organization? And then building out that sort of experience for them so that they are growing to what is their needs during that time. Now, obviously, it's hard to be very specific about something like a broad statement like that, but I think therein itself lies the importance of customizing it. Now, there are other ways to really build motivation and team spirit and those kind of things. And I think around that is to really have, maybe, icebreakers is the term that people like to use in professional setting, but having certain icebreakers that really break through the, superficial, so to speak. One of my favorite ones is there's a New York Times article from way back when that's called 33 Questions to Fall in Love. And you pick 7 questions from there in some sort of progressive fashion and ask people to pair up into twos and go through that process of answering those 7 questions. You will break through ice so quickly. And that's kind of one example, but the other ways is to really make sure you are building in, bonding activities, things that are not all work related and organization related throughout the process. And I think that builds, team spirit as well.
Sure. Awesome. Well, Nihal, on behalf of the YLS members and all of our attendees, we thank you for your time this evening. I know it's really, been inspirational to me to hear your story, as well as that flow chart was, it just sums up the whole story there for you as far as finding engagement, following your passion, getting engaged. It's amazing. So just real quick, please be sure to visit our website, Young Leaders, UWay, as in United Way, ccr.org, for more information on membership, events, and don't miss out on our final REMIX session on our playlist. And that's going to be our professional development with Isaac Serwanga, and that will be on November 17th. Any final closing thoughts or remarks you want to leave us with, Nihal?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I hope you all engage in as many ways as possible during this time. Just want to reiterate, there's no wrong ways to engage with the community. By putting yourself out there, it's going to be the best way to learn more about yourself. So thank you so much.
Awesome. And how can everybody reach you in case they have more questions?
Yes, please. Let me drop my my email in the chat. I actually just got a new number, so it's just going to take me a second to pull that out. But this is my email.
Sure. Oh,
and let me also put my number in the chat.
awesome. Thanks, Nihal. We appreciate your time so much. Everybody else, have a great evening, and thanks for joining us on our remix.